Welcome to FPB's Meet the Candidates. This Cable 10 series allows you, the voter and the viewer, to get a closer look at our local candidates and to hear a conversation about the topics that are important here in our community. We've taken questions through our social media outlets, through email. We've talked to civic groups, and we've gathered all kinds of questions and information about things that are important here to our constituents, and we're going to discuss those with our candidates. We're getting informed because it's election season. So this is all leading up to the general election, which is on November 8th, and we encourage you to vote. So today, our guest is Teresa Barton, and she is the Democratic candidate for state senate in what is now the 20th district, which is where we are now. We used to not be, so we're going to talk about that. So I'd like to welcome Teresa Barton.
Well, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. And thanks to the Plant Board, Cable 10, all you guys for just continuing to keep the public informed.
That's what we do.
Okay. All right, to kind of tell you about me?
Yeah, so I just want to start out. If people don't know who you are, just tell us a little bit about yourself, okay. Your experience, and why you've chosen to run for state senate.
Well, thank you. Well, let's start from, I'm a lifelong resident of Franklin County. My brothers and I were raised here. My dad was a union tool and die maker, my mom a waitress, and I went through public schools here, graduated Franklin County High School in '79. Was kind of floundering a little. I was a teen parent, had a little bit of a hiccup there to kind of get things going, but it's turned out to be just a fabulous thing. Started in state government in the early 80s, excuse me, and ended up working, having a full career in state government. I worked in higher ed for many years. And then David Hughes was elected judge executive. I had an opportunity to serve as his deputy. So I did that for 2 years, and then I ran for office. So in '98, I ran my first term as judge executive, and then I ran again in 2002. And so I was elected twice as judge executive. And we did a variety of things, and maybe I can get into that at some point, but everything from water, sewer, natural disasters, a lot of community service, public projects that we were engaged in, new fire station, like I can go on and on about that. But again, graduated Kentucky State University with accounting and business degrees. And during that time, I was working full-time as well. And once I finished as judge executive, Governor Fletcher was elected and asked if I would serve. Didn't really find anything until he developed the Office of Drug Control Policy. I became executive director of the Office of Drug Control Policy, and I was elevated to Deputy Secretary of the Justice Cabinet during that time. Retired in 2007, and early 2008, I began working in the energy efficiency facility improvement industry. So I'm now in my 15th year of working there. I have 2 wonderful sons, great daughter-in-laws, and 2 grandchildren with one on the way. Okay. So that's a encapsulation
that's
of a lot. Yeah, I've got some age on me.
So we've had some changes.
Yes, we have.
Earlier in the year, the legislature did some redistricting, and so Franklin County is now in a new district, and you are running to represent us here in Franklin County, but not only here in Franklin County, but in other counties. So can you tell us what areas the 20th district covers?
Most certainly. So it's Franklin, Owen, Carroll, Gallatin. There are 9 precincts in Boone and 4 in Kenton. Okay. So this is quite the reach and the stretch. A lot of constituents. There are 115,000 folks, over 89,000 voters. It's a large district that has a whole swath up through the river counties up to northern Kentucky.
Okay. So I know you weren't in the legislature at the time of this redistricting, but I want to ask the question. So how does this redistricting, does that benefit Franklin County at all?
I believe it does. Okay. If you look at the numbers, now that I'm running from Franklin County and my opponent is not, I think it benefits Franklin County a lot. We have, being a moderate Democrat, I think I still have the credentials and the desire to work across party lines and serve. And we have the numbers here in Franklin County that we could actually run this district. With the river counties, with the more rural counties, Owen, Gallatin, and Carroll, I think they understand service. They understand someone who's common sense minded. So I believe we can actually do very well here. The needs in Boone and Kenton are a little different, but they're really not a lot different. When
Okay.
you look at infrastructure, you look at the roads. I have traversed these roads now for 4 months, I guess.
Yeah.
And the roads are in rough shape.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of the same needs. So I think it benefits Franklin County, have someone here in this seat in Franklin County to represent us. I think that's extremely important.
Okay. So, would you agree that right now the political atmosphere today is pretty divided?
It's very divided. And I think that's another reason that I'm, and I didn't really talk about why I decided to run. When I looked at this district, the layout, I looked at having Franklin County representation, someone who was independent-minded, but yet common sense. Being a lifelong Democrat, a lot of folks, oh, well, she changed during the Fletcher administration. I did not. He never asked me to, and I never offered. To me, it's the heart and soul of working families. It's who we are. It's what I represent. So by being that candidate, I feel like serving Franklin County and just being that person that has that experience in local government, I think that will serve this district well.
Okay. So what can a new member of the legislature do to address the divide and build consensus?
Well, I think we could sort of hold those extreme views and some of that toxic atmosphere at bay. Being more, like I say, the common sense. I feel like I can reach across party lines because I always have. When we were doing sewer projects and water, I never once looked at your political affiliation. This, to me, is completely about people over party, and it's taking those extreme toxic views away, and let's look at a common ground. And that's what I think I bring, that's what I represent. I've done it not only in drug control policy, I've done it as Deputy Secretary of the Justice Cabinet, and primarily as Judge Executive, and even into my entire career. I just think that's what we need right now, is someone to bridge the divide and take some of those extreme views, and let's talk about what we can do to come to a common ground. Sure, I'll be in the minority, but I don't look at that as a negative. I think that, to me, is sort of safeguarding that common sense view that I think we're all desperately seeking.
Okay. Well, we talked about being in the minority. Right now, the Republicans hold supermajorities in both chambers.
They do.
So how do you plan to navigate those waters and find wins for your district as a member of the minority caucus?
Well, I think when they look at what I represent and who I represent, they'll have a little better understanding. Franklin County needs a lot of help. We have the most public employees who are retired, and that's a huge part of the budget. We need to make sure that we are taking care of them. And I don't believe these other legislators can come to Frankfort in good conscience, look these public employees in the eye, and not try to do something to take care of them. They've worked way too hard. The benefits have been diminished over the years, and I think I'm that person that will fight for them.
Okay. Can you tell me a time when you've shown independence from your party on an issue of major importance?
Again, as Judge Executive, I don't know that party ever came into play. We were all Democrats, although I recall having several very conservative folks on there when I was Judge Executive, particularly the first term. And I never failed. When I was Judge Executive and we were in fiscal court, I never once failed to look at those squires and say, at what point would you like to discuss your opposition to this action? And they had their piece. They got to speak. So if they convinced the rest of the court, then we, of course, would change direction. Never once did we have a harsh word. It was very respectful. And that's the other thing I think that is missing, is the respect. For someone to discount someone because of their party affiliation, I think is just, it's just a travesty. Should not occur. We all have a voice, and we represent people who are important.
So what would you say is the biggest issue facing our district right now?
I would say the biggest issue, we have a lot of issues, and many of those revolve around public employees, making sure that they're taken care of long term, the infrastructure, but I'm still probably leaning to that number one issue, and that's the opioid crisis.
Okay.
I do believe with the criminal element, I think with the drug addiction, there are just a lot of those issues. You could look at any walk of life and someone, you're surrounded with someone, or you have a family member who has been affected. Maybe not just opioids, but addiction in general. That, to me, is affecting our workforce. It's affecting those showing up for work. just that vibrant community. And I think that's something we're going to have to really focus on, put some money into it, put some effort into it, and make sure we address it. So that's probably, like I said, there's so many issues.
Yeah.
The economy right now nationally, not a lot we can do locally, but I think we can continue to invest in our businesses.
Sure.
Can help
Do you
with
have
that.
any particular measures in mind in addressing the opioid crisis here?
Well, drug control policy, I think, went a long way in getting that started. We need to be very aggressive with our law enforcement, continue on with the drug task force effort, which we made, again, when we were in drug control policy. I want to make sure that we stop the drugs from coming in. That's the number one issue, stopping them before they get into our state. We have 65, 75, 64. There are all kinds of ways to get here. We need to continue to invest in those. Education, I know back in the day it was just say no, but really educating our youth about what it does, how easy it is to get addicted. I can't tell you the number of folks I've spoken with their parents, and it's heart-wrenching. It really is, when they get addicted and they go in a downward spiral, and many times they've lost their children.
Right.
I think we need to focus on the education in that area, but also recovery. It takes more than once oftentimes. Our jails are full of folks who have mental illness connected to, drug exposure.
Yeah.
So to me, that's extremely important. So I think focusing on that, making sure that we give the law enforcement the tools they need to make that happen, as well as invest in those offices.
Sure. Well, you made mention of taking care of our public employees, and as you know,
Yes.
Frankfort is the home to more state retirees than any other community.
Yes.
The only authority to grant a cost of living adjustment lies with the Kentucky General Assembly.
Correct.
And the last such adjustment took effect in July 2011.
It did.
Some retirees believe they are paying the price for lawmakers' past fiscal mismanagement of their pensions. As the legislator that will represent these folks, what kind of commitment can you make regarding protecting the state retirement fund and supporting a cost of living adjustment?
I absolutely support a cost of living adjustment. I'm a retiree myself. Many of my family members are, or they're on their way to be retirees. We've got to do better. That's all there is to it. The mismanagement along the way, agree. That is not the fault of the state employees. That is not the fault of the state retirees. That is, that lies squarely in the hands of the legislature and how that was approved. How the managers were approved. Retirement. You can't really give a COLA according to, I think it was a 2013 law that was enacted regarding fully funding. So until it's fully funded or that money is there to support long-term the cost of living raise, my understanding is that it can't be granted.
Yeah.
We do have a surplus. There are ways that we can bring in more money. If it's there are a variety of ways I think that we could change the taxation system in order to bring in more money.
Sure.
We need to get it fully funded. I think that's the number one thing.
Okay.
We can get it fully funded, then we can at least start giving some decent cost of living. Many are living on their state retirement alone. They're not eligible for Social Security.
Yeah.
And I
We're
know
gonna get to
it's
that.
I know it's tough. It really is tough, and it should not have been that way.
Yeah.
State employees notoriously work for less for better benefits. That's how, when I went in the 80s, that's how it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't make a lot of money going in. I can remember that. I thought it was great, though.
Yeah. On the bright side, the Kentucky legislature did approve 8% across-the-board raises for state government workers this year. Bad news is that, however, educators across the state are disappointed that the General Assembly did not approve an adequate increase in state funding for across-the-board raises for teachers. Between 2008 and the start of 2022, the average inflation-adjusted salary for classroom teachers in Kentucky fell 8.1%, while SEEK funding fell 17.7% during the same time frame. Do you feel the legislature risks worsening a teacher shortage in Kentucky that weakens the state's vital public education system?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just received the endorsement of the Kentucky educators, and I think they know that I will fight for them. They're some of the most important people. Some of the most important people in my youth were my teachers. They were, they were there for me. They obviously took care of us. They treated us as their own. To not be able to give a raise to teachers it's ridiculous. I don't know what other word to use. It's ridiculous that you don't invest in them. They don't want to go back to the classroom. Many of them who are eligible, they're going to go home because they don't need the changes that have been made that have made it hard to teach. There's so many administrative requirements attached to that. And it just makes it hard to be a teacher these days, which you have to put up with in the classroom, if the discipline has been gone. Working for less, when I can tell you a number of young ladies who I know who are teachers who left that vocation altogether to do something else because they could make more money, they felt safer. Things have to change, and that's something that I really want to dig into, find out what more we can do, what I can do to help.
Right. And you did mention that the state has a record amount of money in their rainy day fund and surplus.
Yes, they do.
So is that an option you would consider if elected?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it is. It's something I will fight for.
Yeah.
I will tell you that right now. And state employees, let's go back to that real quick.
Sure.
8% one time in how many years? That's not enough.
Right. It's not enough, but they're glad to get it, I'm sure.
Oh, they're very, it's the gift horse, you don't. You want to be very appreciative that they actually recognize the significance and the importance of making sure that they receive some adequate pay.
Sure.
But I've seen pay equity studies. I did a pay equity study when I was county judge, and we took each office during that time frame. We gave them an adjustment, and then we continued to try to make annual increases in their pay. That's something we need to look at as well, because I feel like you have a lot of those state employees who are underpaid for what they're doing. When you can leave and go to the private sector and get a 30 or 40% increase in your salary, but you're loyal. Many of them are very loyal, or they're vested in the system.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate, but state employees should be getting a cost of living raise at a minimum every single year.
Yeah. Earlier this year, the legislature passed an education bill, Senate Bill 1, which started out as a provision to give district superintendents the power to set curriculum and hire principals. It had previously been made by the School-Based Decision-Making Council. So why was that important to do? Would that have been something you supported?
I would have to look at a little more detail. I am aware of it. I do think that the board and the superintendent should have significant authority. The idea of a site-based, school-based decision-making council is extremely important. Those are parents. Those are parents who are observing. Those are parents who are vested in what happens in the schools. So to give them a tremendous amount of authority, I agree. They need to make sure that they have a huge stake in this. But you hire a superintendent to do a job, and that job is to make sure that you have the adequate administrators with the right credentials. It's a slippery slope there because of the politics that get involved in it, someone who knows someone else, and then they hire someone who really shouldn't be there for the right reason, or they're not there for the right reason. That's a real tough one. It really is. But I do believe that the local site-based decision-making council, they're there. They're invested in that community, and they're there all the time.
Right.
Superintendents come and go.
Yeah.
So you've got to be real careful. To me, that's a slippery slope.
Okay. Another part of that bill that got added on later added restrictions on how history can be taught, especially concerning race. So it directed educators to teach American history in a way some teachers and historians say whitewashes the role of racism in shaping society. It also includes a list of historical documents that middle and high schools must embed into their curriculum. Do you have any concerns about these restrictions, or that this provision inserts itself into the decision-making of local school districts?
I do. When you talk about banning books, and you talk about, and certainly, don't get me wrong, there are some that are completely inappropriate based on the age. I don't have a problem with that. That is something that needs to be decided. The parents need to be involved. They need to be engaged in what's in your school's library. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah.
Age appropriate. But when you start changing curriculum from a political standpoint, there's a disconnect there. You have educators who have educated, you have historians who understand history. Let's stick with historians who have written the books, who understand the history.
Sure.
To me, it's more, I don't want to say, race baiting, if you will, but I feel like the General Assembly stepped on an area that they're not an expert in. That should be with educators.
Right.
Those are folks who have gone to school. They have the history of teaching. They know what they're doing with students. As a parent, I think it's your responsibility to make sure of what's being taught to your children that is age appropriate. We all need to understand the history of what's happened.
Right.
In this world, in our nation. It's
Sure.
critical.
Sure. Senate Bill 83, which was passed by the legislature this year, bans trans girls from participating in girls' sports from 6th grade through college. Do you support that measure, and why was this important to do? And the real question is, do you see any future consequences to this, like lawsuits, and how it affects the children?
I'm sure there'll be lawsuits.
Yeah.
And while my heart goes out to those young people, I was a student athlete. I was an athlete as a young lady. I completely disagree with men, with boys competing in my league. So I do not agree. Like I said, my heart goes out to those children, those young folks in the trans community. It does. It really does. But I think it's wrong. I think it's unfair. I don't believe that should occur.
Okay. We're going to talk about reproductive rights.
Okay, that's a tough one.
It is. What do you think is the legislature's role regarding reproductive health care, and do you think that that's an appropriate role?
It appears that the Supreme Court believes it's an appropriate role.
Yeah.
Frankly, I do not.
Okay.
I just do not. I don't
yeah.
think that reproductive rights of non-experts in the General Assembly should have any say whatsoever in a woman's medical decision.
Okay. We're going to have a constitutional amendment on the ballot.
We are.
This time. They call it the Yes for Life Amendment. Is that an amendment you support? Why or why not? And can you kind of help explain what it is to our viewers?
Sure.
I'll
be voting no.
Okay.
And let me explain why. Being a woman, first of all, I was a teen parent. You know, I have a wonderful, wonderful son. I would never change that choice. My choice was obviously life. This constitutional amendment will take away any right whatsoever to make that choice. Frankly, it's a medical decision. I believe it's between your faith, your family, and your physician. It is not between you and your senator or your state representative.
Yeah.
That's Teresa's view. I am not the judge and jury. My Christian beliefs really, I personally probably could never have an abortion. But if there was a medical decision that my physician advised me, oh, you have an ectopic pregnancy, oh, you have these issues, then I would obviously have to listen to my doctor, not my legislator.
Right. Well, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, Justice Thomas wrote in his concurring opinion that SCOTUS should reconsider all of the court's substantive due process precedents, including Obergefell versus Hodges, which guarantees the constitutional right to same-sex marriage. If that happens and other laws start getting rolled back and moved back to states, first of all, that's going to put the onus on our state legislature. And then do you believe that states must recognize marriages between same-sex couples if it's a decision you have to make?
I'd rather not make that decision. I don't believe, again, we are elected by the people to serve when it comes to the health, safety, and welfare of our constituents and those people who live in our communities. A lot of these decisions have become so politically toxic that it's completely uncalled for.
Yeah.
When does this stop? My concern is we're looking at birth control, we're looking at in vitro. It doesn't stop.
Right.
And I have a family member very close to me. We would not have this child had we not had in vitro. How many pregnancies could we continue to prevent if they touch on birth control? It's just, it's a slippery slope. And I feel like the legislature is continuing to encroach on our personal lives and our personal decisions when in fact it's none of their business.
Okay. Well, something that is their business that they've been working on is the tax code.
Yes.
So there's been an effort in the tax code changes to move toward a more consumption-based tax code, expanding the sales tax and reducing individual income taxes. What's your opinion on those moves, and how do you plan to be involved in that discussion if elected?
I would like to be heavily involved in that discussion, and let me tell you why. I'm all for lower taxes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If we could do away with the state income tax, that would be phenomenal. If we could do away with, my auto ad valorem, a lot of these taxes, that'd be great. Unfortunately, governments have to have tax in order to function. So to lower taxes, absolutely. And I think there are some areas that we could look at from the consumption base. I think that makes sense. I represent a lot of folks who are hardworking, farms, union workers. I represent them. As a matter of fact, I'm endorsed by a lot of them. For us to move all of those taxes to consumer items, I'm afraid it's going to hurt working families. We have to balance that. So I want to make sure that I have a seat at the table on every tax that's introduced, because when it starts to hurt those folks who are trying to just get by, and we have removed the other income, we still have to have something to replace it.
Yeah.
And let's just make sure that we balance this and we don't harm working families. I understand from a chamber standpoint of view, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a whole lot of sense from a small business, and I've had small business. So I hope that I have a seat at that table to where we can monitor where we go with that.
Yeah.
I just want to be careful that we're not hurting families, because those are the folks who make it all happen for Kentucky.
Right. An important thing that the General Assembly should be looking at ways of doing is raising our revenue.
Exactly. Exactly.
So generating revenue so we can minimize those future tax increases.
Yes.
One thing that has been on the table for several years is sports betting.
Yes.
Can you explain to me the sports betting issue? Because to me, it seems like we have some gambling, but not all gambling. And the issue got some traction, like I said, in years past,
Right.
but has never really come to fruition. So, do you support the wagering?
I do.
Yeah.
I support gaming.
Yeah.
I support sports wagering. I don't understand all of the intricacies of each item. I know that there
don't either.
is the historic racing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's permitted.
Yeah.
But we're going to hurt the horse industry if we go to a different kind of gambling.
Right.
There are gambling happens every Sunday, Thursday, Monday night. I know a lot of folks who go across the river, they place their bet, and they come
Sure.
back. I'm not opposed to sports betting. I think gaming is something that we all do. We go to the horse tracks, we play the lottery.
Yeah.
We just need to make sure we do have some safe measures in place from the addiction standpoint, because to me that is something we need to really pay attention to and look out for. But that could fund a lot of items, a lot of things, because Kentuckians bet.
Yeah.
Kentuckians wager.
Yeah.
So it's something that I could support. Of course, everything has a nuance and everything
yeah.
has a detail. But it is something that I would support.
Okay. Another issue that has gotten traction in the legislature but kind of fizzled out is just March, just of this past year, the House of Representatives voted to pass a medical cannabis bill.
Yes.
It was the second time that the House has passed it, and the Senate leadership refused to assign a bill to committee.
Yes.
So, and that killed the bill. So is that something that you would support?
I have publicly supported that. And let me tell you a couple of reasons why.
Sure.
While to me, I'm very strong on drug control policy.
Sure.
I do believe, if you look at Jason Nemes's bill, the last one in the 2021, I guess, session, like you said, there was a lot of traction. And I understand that marijuana, on the face, it is a gateway drug. It absolutely is. But I also have seen evidence-based studies that show medical cannabis. You're talking prescription. You're talking formulary. It's very detailed as to how it can be prescribed. It has shown to help folks. There are so many people with ailments, and they have very little choice except for opioid or other kinds of painkillers. And that's the main reason I support it. I've just seen too many people who I believe it would help.
Yeah.
And for us to not at least give that a shot, I think we should.
Yeah.
And I know probably the one reason the General Assembly doesn't want to do it is because it opens the door to the next step,
Yeah.
to the next step.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to, but I do believe that we at least need to go ahead and make that legal.
Okay. Well, let's look into the future.
Yes.
Let's vision that you were elected.
Yes.
What's the first bill you're going to file?
Wow, the first bill. It would probably be something to help with families. It would be something to help make sure that we protect the families. Everything from foster families to, how we educate our children and all. It would be something in that realm. I've given it some thought on protecting state employees, developing infrastructure. This will be a non-budget year coming up. So, I'll be fortunate if I get to get a bill moving, being in the minority. But there are several things that, that are in that realm that I would like to look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to you now and let you
Okay.
address our viewers directly and tell
Okay.
them why they need to vote for you on November 8th.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Well, Kathy, thank you again and the Frankfurt Plan Board for this opportunity. Again, I'm Teresa Barton. I'm running for Senate in the 20th District. That encompasses Franklin, Owen, Gallatin, Carroll, and Boone and Kenton. I think my history in local government, my history in public service, me working tirelessly over the years to serve, that's truly who I am. I think I have a servant's heart. I'm someone who, I came from very modest means. I lost a brother to a drug issue a long time ago. And so that's why I think the drug issue is important to me. I want to serve. I feel like it's time that we have someone who has common sense, someone who is independent-minded, someone who's going to look out for you, someone who's going to look out for the voters, not only in this community, but truly the state. Because when you're in the Senate, you represent your district, but the actions you take affect the entire state. So I'd like to be that person to serve you. On November 8th, you can certainly pull that lever, check that box, whichever way you vote. If you'd like to learn more about who I am, you can go to barton4kysenate.com. There's a lot more information about who I am, my history, and how I will serve you. I'm just an ordinary person like most everyone else who lives in this district, and I'm the kind of person that wants to reach out. I want to hear from you. I would like to understand your needs more. I want to make sure we have good roads and we have a tax system that is actually fair. I want to make sure that we do those things that government should be doing for you, not overreaching, but making sure that we're there to serve you. So on November 8th, again, vote Barton for State Senate, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we appreciate you for
Yes.
coming here and sitting down talking to us about all this stuff.
Thank you. How fun.
And I appreciate our viewers for watching because it takes a lot. You gotta really pay attention and get informed because it is election season. So after you get informed, we want you to go vote on November 8th. When you're done voting, go home and turn it on Channel 10 and watch the live election returns. We'll be there at the county clerk's office giving you the play-by-plays on who's coming out ahead. So we appreciate you watching. It's election season, and it's time to use your voice, and that's your vote. And so go do that on November 8th. Thanks for watching.